Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis, happy Friday night. Yes, it's Friday night. It's almost 10:30 and I'm late for a really good reason because we had not one but two people in that courtroom today taking notes for us. So I think we've got pretty much the whole day covered. It's just taken a little while to put all the notes together and kind of put them in order. First, big shout out to Big E, Chasing Paper 89 on Twitter, and also Jamie, who was so kind to take some photos and tag us. She is at just_TREBER on Twitter. Jamie took a few photos for us and looks like she was there. I don't want to say bright and early, but it's dark. So she was there really early. And then this is super cool. Check this out. Leaving Pike County Courthouse for lunch break, Pretty Lies and Alibis was mentioned on the courthouse steps first thing this morning. Keep up the good work, Gigi. Here's Jake's attorneys during lunch. Took plenty of notes too. So you guys go give them a follow and a huge thank you because without them, we would not have the episode we have in store tonight. Also, want to give a big, big thank you to Janice, Kimberly, Amy, Lee, Michelle, Wendy, Willow's mom, and Summer Living for your donations. I appreciate it. I threw this little thing up on Twitter. A lot of people had. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. And like everybody started buying coffees. And look, guys, if coffee were alcohol, y'all would get nothing out of me because I drink it all day. So thank you, guys. It does help offset the cost to do the podcast. I have to have separate internet, a lot of subscriptions to different websites, so it does help me a lot. I do appreciate it. Huge correction. I totally said something really confusing on the last episode, and I see where people were like, what? So what I meant to say was I thought the prosecution could have ended direct with Jake better if she kind of pointed out like George knew about it beforehand. Yes. George went with you guys. Yes. He was in some of the residences when the murders happened. Yes. He helped cover it up. Yes. Instead, I said when she closed her case, y'all, it was just like a lost in translation from my brain to my mouth. If you're new, you will find out that that's not uncommon with me. All right. Music fact of the day before we get started. The longest duration song to hit the #1 charts. Just that record just got broken last year. Originally, it was held by Don McLean for American Pie, which was in 1972. It was just broken last year with Taylor Swift's 10-minute version of All Too Well, which I love. Both great songs. If you're ever on a road trip with me, I will sing American Pie word for word, start to finish. But I also love All Too Well. So Jake wrapped up today. He's done. He's been released as a witness. And what do we have next week? Well, early in the week, we are going to have a gun expert talk about how they reconstructed the murder weapons that were found in the concrete buckets. We're going to hear the wiretaps. And then hopefully by Wednesday, Angela will be on the stand. As far as I know, she's opting out. So we will again rely on our amazing note takers to bring it to us. So first thing today, there was a hearing because there was a motion by the defense to get Jake's lawyer's notes and case files. Ultimately, Deering was like, no, not going to happen. Move on. So anyways, let's get into what happened today. Jake met with the prosecutors last April for 2 days, then again in the fall for 2 or 3 days, about 5 hours each time. As part of his plea deal, Jake asked to see his parents, his brother, Sophia and Vine one last time before going to prison for what he called a family reunion. And the prosecutors told him, fat chance, not going to happen. So according to Parker, Jake asked for a lot of things, including for Angela and George's charges to be dismissed and not Billy's. Of course, we know that didn't happen. He has not seen Sophia since the day he was arrested, nor should he ever again. His attorney showed him the evidence that they had against him before he confessed. And Jake admitted that he did not want the death penalty. He didn't want to be executed, which is ironic because he gave that penalty to 8 innocent people who were mostly sleeping or in bed. Jake was asked if he thought life in prison was a punishment, and he said no. So Parker says something like, "What do you think? There's going to be a gym in there? What do you expect?" And there's an objection. And then Canepa laughs out loud. So Parker asked Jake if he had any memory problems, and Jake says yes. He gets confused at times. He has trouble recalling things, and sometimes he remembers things in pieces, and it ends up it wasn't the way it happened. I don't know if that's convenience or what, but it sounds convenient. For example, he doesn't remember telling the state in his proffer that after he shot Chris Sr., he put the SKS into the truck. Billy asked Jake to shoot him after he came out of Chris Sr.'s house because he felt bad about what he had just done. And then he said, we've always heard or we've heard since the trial started that Chris Sr. gave Billy a look. Well, today Jake said Chris Sr. had a why look on his face right before he was murdered. Like, why are you doing this? Why? Because in my mind, if you think about it, he couldn't see Jake or George. He gets his arm essentially shot off, and he turns to go into the safety and the shelter of his home in what I would imagine to see his friend standing there with a gun in his face. And man, I hope that's something Billy sees every night. He closes his little petty eyes. Jake talked about being homeschooled through American Homeschool. So when it came to tests, he told his mom, Angela, he wasn't doing that crap. So what did Angela do? She took his test for him. And especially in the subjects he didn't want to take. He didn't like social studies, history, or English. She took the test because she wanted him to graduate. He said he was going to be a truck driver or a mechanic anyway. And he eventually went to the diesel tech program in Lucasville. He talked about how close he was to Angela and believe he said he was her favorite. She did work in the past. She had worked at Walmart, and also the mentally insert offensive word here, home Frederica owned. He said Angela was vigilant watching social media and the topics websites after the murders. She would look on Facebook for any kind of outlandish rumors, opinions, news broadcasts, and just keeping tabs on things. Jake made a profile that was fake on Facebook with the first name Josh. He had stolen a picture from somebody in Alaska, and he would use that fake profile to test Hanna May, sending her inboxes to see if she was interested in a relationship and things like that. He also made some fake profiles after the murders and I guess was looking up things and commenting as well. He said that he felt video games did have an effect on him to an extent. His favorite games were Call of Duty, Halo, Resident Evil, any kind of first-person shooter game, and of course, zombie games. He also said that when one of the boys, him or George, had a birthday, the other one got presents. That ain't how it worked in my house. Just saying. He was asked about selling a chicken to a woman at some kind of farm day thing, and he lied and told her that the chicken was pregnant, apparently. He was asked about that. He said he doesn't remember if that actually happened or not because he's told that story so many times. So the day or the morning after the murders, Jake said when he got that call from his friend named Andrew, he told Jake they're all dead. And Jake said he thought to himself, I know they're already dead. Parker was asking him how many times he thought he shot the gun that night. And he said that he knows he reloaded after he left Frankie's house. And he was asked if he expected a shootout that night with any of the Rodens on the night of the murders, and he said he did not. Talking about burying that weapon duffel bag, the duffel bag with the weapons inside the barn where they removed that post, he said they dug a hole about 16 inches deep, and George helped. We had heard that earlier this week. They dug it back up in June, and it was actually Billy's idea to build the goose house. So they put the buckets of concrete with the weapons down in it on the same day they installed that goose house. We know that was not brought up until after all the Wagners were arrested. So, you think about it, it's scary how close they came to getting away with it. I really firmly believe if the investigator hadn't have looked down and saw the shell casings in their driveway, it's scary to think we might not be here today. That really, I know they had suspicions and they had a few things maybe, but those shell casings, it seems to me, really is what kickstarted all the search warrants that eventually led to justice. Jake said with Hanna May, it was not love at first sight. She grew on him. When asked if he thought Hanna May was like the one, that person, Jake said, I love Hannah. He said they talk about having a baby because some of Hanna May's friends were already having their children. He wasn't sure, but he said she was very firm about it. He said the night Sophia was conceived was all on her. Hanna May wanted more kids. He said he was not sure at first, but eventually he did come around to the idea. They were in agreement of how many kids they would have, how close together in age they would be, how they would be raised, agreeing not to have their kids in certain environments. And he said he uses the R word, and it really bothers me. I used to work with autistic kids. I have a nephew who's 8 who's autistic. I cannot stand the R word. It just makes my skin crawl. But he did not want their kids to be a dud, insert offensive word here. So Parker asked what that meant, and Jake said a dud is when a gun is fired and it doesn't work, and then insert offensive word here to get that little saying. I'm never going to repeat that word, y'all. Sorry. Jake says he loves insert the offensive word again, people, and doesn't want to, what he says, sound racist, talking about people with disabilities. He said even if their kids wanted to eventually become farmers, they both wanted their kids to go to college. And he said he was adamant against public school because of how bad drug use and premarital sex was in public schools. He said that happened here anyways, talking about him obviously being homeschooled, and he didn't want their kids exposed to the same thing. He said he doesn't want to talk bad about Hanna May, but after they broke up, he felt she gave up her parenting standards and tried to make him look bad. He said he was trying to be super dad, but she wasn't holding up her end of the bargain. It's very narcissistic. A lot of the things, I mean, it's clear he's a narcissist, but, you know, it was always her, never me, never took responsibility for the way anything went down. It's the whole family. You think about the way nature versus nurture is always so interesting to me because, you know, you could take a baby that's born to parents that would have been terrible parents and give them to intelligent, educated, drug-free, whatever, non-abusive, perfect home life, Brady Bunch type house. Or is it nature nurture? Because you see, especially from what we're going to go through today, that from a very, very, very young age, these boys were taught how to do things the wrong way. They were encouraged to do it. And you have to wonder, I mean, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. It's always very interesting to me. He talks about Hanna May saying that she felt Sophia liked him better than she did her. He told her that wasn't true. And he said to this day, he doesn't think Hanna May cheated sexually on him before they broke up. He also said that after they broke up, she started smoking again and things like that. He was talking about his bond with Sophia being very special, and he wanted her to grow up to be a good Christian. And he said he also wanted her to have a good man in her life and lots of children, lots of grandbabies for him. And he said Sophia wanted to be a pediatrician. He did take Sophia to see Kylie about a year after the murders, and he said that they stayed for about a half an hour. So Parker, I don't know if Parker was trying to poke the bear or what, but he shows him a picture from Facebook of Hanna May and Corey kissing, and then another one of them laying beside each other, and asked if he had seen that. And Jake said it brought up some memories seeing that. He said he was jealous, obviously, when Hanna May started seeing other guys. And because she started seeing other guys, it caused him to become consumed and overcome with fear that something would happen to Sophia. And Parker says he points out essentially you were consumed with the possibility even before Sophia was born. And Jake said it was because he knew victims, including Tabby, a cousin of his mom, and that made him protective of Sophia's innocence. And he said after her birth, it went from joy to fear. And he said something about holding her for the first time and then like fast forwarding in his mind. These people were so paranoid about everything. I mean, as a parent, you're always paranoid something might happen to your kids, but it drove these people to do really just, and ironically, Jake's a sex offender, registered sex offender, because when he was charged in the murders, they also charged him for, Hanna May being underage. So I think that's just ironic. He was actually worried she would bring that up if a custody battle ensued. He approved of Angela doing the GoFundMe, and Parker had him read it out loud. We read it a few episodes ago. I'd found it on the Wayback Machine. He also admits that he told Hanna May if she didn't tell Charlie he actually was the father, they could get back together and he would raise her. So he said they went to Alaska the first time to look for jobs and just sort of get away from all the gossip and to keep Sophia out of the spotlight. He said they really had no ties keeping them there. They came back, and that's kind of around the time that presser came out about if you've had any contact with the Wagners about firearms or vehicles to get in touch with authorities. So they got their stuff and moved to Alaska. Jake said God also told him it was time to go. They thought maybe they would return to Ohio in about 5 years. He admitted that he lied to BCI both times they came to the property, which is not a shocker. Then he started talking about going to church in Alaska, and he said he went almost every Sunday. He wanted to find a good Christian wife and mother to help raise Sophia. Then he met Beth Ann, and Parker says, and you killed her other mother. And Jamie wrote in her notes, Jake suppresses a smile and says yes. He says on their wedding night, she lied to him, and he started to see that Beth Ann wasn't who she claimed to be. He said on the night of their wedding, he went to watch the finale of some anime show that he liked a lot on her phone and went to YouTube. And as soon as he started typing, there was like a history. It was like white witch spells and all kinds of witchcraft stuff. And the other history popped up. And when he asked her about it, she said it must have been auto-suggested, but Jake thought she was lying about that. He said, nobody wants to be married to a witch. That's serious stuff. October is National Eczema Awareness Month. According to the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, while it's usually thought of as a childhood disease, around 16.5 million adults in the U.S. have eczema. And while it affects people in various ways, 51.3% of adults with atopic dermatitis say it limits their lifestyle. 39% say it causes them to avoid social interactions because of their appearance, and 43% say it affects their activities. Luckily, as you know, Gladskin is here to help. But what actually causes the itchiness, redness, inflammation, and discomfort in the skin is a disruption of the bacterial environment, also called the skin microbiome. Gladskin specifically works to target the imbalance in your skin's microbiome. But unlike other skin brands and prescription medications, Gladskin uses MicroBalance, a revolutionary protein that restores the balance of the good and bad bacteria that live on your skin so it can finally heal. It's so effective that 91% of users, adults and children, who tried their top-selling eczema cream reported significant improvement after just 7 days. Gladskin with MicroBalance is steroid-free, works without harsh ingredients, and is clinically proven to reduce eczema symptoms. It's even gentle enough for babies. So, if you've been frustrated with your treatment options, don't wait to try Gladskin. They're offering my listeners 15% off plus free shipping on your first order at gladskin.com/whattheworld. That's gladskin.com/whattheworld for 15% off plus free shipping. gladskin.com/whattheworld. He said Beth Ann was losing her faith in God and changed a lot when they moved to Ohio. And Jake probably just couldn't comprehend that she changed because she's living with like the creepiest people you could ever live with. Jake was asked if they consummated the marriage on their wedding night, and Jake said they did. Parker flat out asked, did you force her? Because if you remember, Beth Ann said they had agreed not to consummate the marriage on their wedding night because she was inexperienced, and that Jake did not agree, or he did not keep his promise. So apparently Jake got a very shocked look on his face on the stand and said no, he didn't force her. So after she left, he sent Beth Ann an inbox on Messenger. She never responded, but he assumed at that point she was working with BCI anyway. He said when they got the call from someone named Freddie about the property search, they were all upset. And when they were staying in Missouri, he said they were playing 21 Questions, and Jake said that Beth admitted that she was in a cult. Now, two different people, two different sets of notes. One says teenager, one says Texas. So I don't know if Beth Ann admitted she was in a cult when she was a teenager or when she was in Texas. But at some point, according to Jake, that's what she said. He said she had never mentioned anything about this before. So Jake wanted to stay there in Missouri, but George wasn't having it. He wanted to go back to Ohio to get a better paying job driving trucks. Jake said he didn't have many friends. Moving backwards to when he was at the Bethel Hill house, they talked about the arsons on Bethel Hill Road, and he smiled when he said the first time the arson happened, when the first house burned down, he was 10 or 11. The second time he was 13 or 14, and that was a garage. The third time the house burned down, which is when Tabby lived there, he was 16. The third time said that Frederica was going to sell the land, which was about 600 acres. And Angela was mad it was being sold and they weren't going to be compensated. He said when the first home burned down, the family wanted money for the house that they had rebuilt. She was selling the land. But he said that the materials used to build the house were mostly stolen materials, but they did have $20,000 in it themselves. He said the value of the home was about $200,000, and they decided to fill a big pot with grease on the stove when they burned this third house or this second house down. They put a turkey inside, he said what was like a big crock pot, and it overflowed. And he said he used a water gun or some kind of a squirter to spread the flames around the kitchen. Chris Sr. watched so he could be a witness, and he also was the one that called 911. Jake said he was the one that had to talk to the firemen and the cops, and he felt like Billy had fed him to the wolves, making him be the one to talk to the first responders about the fire. Then we move on to totally my whole theory about nature versus nurture of, from the age of about 10 or 11, Billy started teaching Jake how to pick locks. And when asked why, it was in case he ever got kidnapped or was stranded or something like that. He said between Billy teaching him, watching videos on YouTube of how to pick locks, and then just trial and error, he became really good at it. And he even kept a pick in his wallet at all times. He said that Billy was a prepper and buried a bread truck he had bought that was filled with water and food on their property. He said this was during the Y2K hype. Remember when we all thought our computers wouldn't work and we would go back to Pioneer days because everything electronic would stop working, and then midnight hit and it was like, oh, okay, we're all cool. So he also had bought a sea container as a bomb shelter, which had provisions stocked in there as well. Jake said that Billy taught both him and George how to be survivalists, how to eat roots and mushrooms to survive and kind of live off the land. Jake was around 12 or 13 when Billy told him that he stole things so he wouldn't have to. But Billy said he wanted to be the one to tell Jake and not him hear it from anybody else. One time, Billy stole a trailer full of merchandise and drove it to Mexico. Jake said when he got home, he had $100,000 in a suitcase or a briefcase. Jake remembers getting to hold the $100,000, and that was when they lived at the Bethel Hill house. Billy also told Jake to assume someone was listening, even through the TV. So just paranoia, man, it just runs deep in this family. He said Jake got a truck from some of that money from Billy, and so did George. The family would bury money inside mason jars. He knew they did at the Bethel Hill address. He wasn't sure about Peterson. It reminds me of that scene in Stand By Me where he's burying the pennies under the porch, and in that scene, there's like all these little holes and he can't find his pennies. Vern, that was his name. I need to watch that. That was a really good movie. I've seen it a million times. When Jake was a kid and he would get hurt, for the most part, Billy did not want them to go to the doctor. So he would be the one to fix them up if they got cut or wounded. He would usually go the really safe, sterile route and use duct tape or electrical tape to stitch the boys back up. Jake was hit in the temple with a metal pole that he called a spud bar while building a barn, and Billy and Angela never took him to be seen. Jake said Angela diagnosed him with a heat stroke, and Billy said it was a concussion. Jake said for a week solid, he was constantly vomiting, couldn't walk far, and couldn't eat at all for a week. Another time, he got a huge gash on his forehead while on his four-wheeler. He said he was trying to lasso a tire while George was driving. When he went inside the house, he moved his hand from his head and blood was just gushing out. So they took him to the ER. In between that and when it healed, he busted the stitches like 6 times. And the last time Billy took him back, he told him if he broke that stitch again, that Billy said he would break Jake from neck to nose. Nothing like a loving daddy when you hurt. As the boys got older, we know they joined Billy and they would go steal things. He said they would steal trailers full of hot tubs, trailers full of shoes, cattle, food, washing machines, trucks, cars. They would break into tractor trailers and trucks. They would get trailers with copper and aluminum in them. They would shoplift. He would be the lookout when they were stealing cars and also the lookout at the chop shops. They would steal coins from money machines and vending machines. And Jake said he never stole the fuel himself. It was Billy who did that. He also said that Angela would sell dogs that were advertised as being purebred, but they were actually gotten from puppy mills and passed off as pure breeds. And he said when the doodle dogs kind of became the hot commodity, that's when she started doing that. And then she would kind of undersell these fake purebreds, and she probably paid nothing for them. It's like these kids have seen thievery and lying and deception since they were knee high to a grasshopper. And it's just, you wonder how you get here. It's because, man, these parents were so paranoid about the grandkids. I mean, like, look at your kids. Billy periodically was a truck driver. Jake said that's what inspired him to drive a truck. Jake would drive during the day and George would drive at night. Jake kind of indicated he had an eyesight problem. He's wearing glasses on the stand, by the way. Jake said one time he ran over a short school bus in the truck while driving through Oklahoma. Only the driver was in the bus, and he said, thank God no kids were and nobody was injured. I Googled to see if I could find any kind of a news story about that, and I haven't yet, but if I do, I'll let you know. He said around 2004, Billy joined a super trucker group that would take speed pills to stay awake for days at a time, which was a violation, as we know, of trucking rest rules. I have to give a shout out and a big hey to Trisha the trucker, by the way. She's one of our faithful listeners, and she listens while she trucks it across the country. So, hey, Trish, hope you're safe. It changed his personality, causing him to be irritable and really angry all the time. He also said Billy would go to Florida to buy Percocets, and Jake and George would go on pill runs to get Percocets to sell as well. When asked who all he lied to in the past, he said the Rodens, the Manleys, BCI, Beth Ann. He also said George went along that night to protect him and that it was a last-minute decision to go. Parker asked if he planned the murders. Jake said he did, and he also admitted that Angela bought the shoes from the murders. After the murder, someone came to their house late at night around 11 o'clock, and it freaked Angela out. She was worried that there was a sniper across the creek who was going to seek revenge for these murders. Again, that's a good reason to be paranoid. You're behind the murder of 8 people. I guess I'd be pretty paranoid too. So some of this stuff was on redirect, but I tried to pull things into the timeline. So I'm not really doing like a redirect cross from what I could get from the notes. But on redirect, he recalls going to Frankie's, driving past Dana's, going back to Frankie's, letting Billy and George in. He remembers killing Frankie and Hannah Hazel. He does not remember covering up Chris or Dana. Although from the notes that I read yesterday, it seems like he admitted to pulling the covers onto Chris and Gary. So there's been some inconsistencies between openings and some of the things Jake has testified to. And I'll tell you at the very end what Angela said in response to George's attorneys asking them to officially take death off the table for their client because Jake's finished. He said the reason he targeted the heads of the victims is so it would be painless and instant. Billy was worried the 22 would not penetrate the skull, and Jake reassured him it would. Billy wanted Chris Sr. shot in the head specifically. He said Angela and George both tried to talk him out of killing the Rodens and Hannah Hazel, and he didn't want to do it because he loved Hanna May, and he said we all loved her. He said the original plan was to shoot Chris Sr. At some point, Jake thought Billy was going to just shoot everybody. Angela asked Canepa asked if he told the truth or what they wanted to hear, and Jake said he told the truth while he was on the stand. He said George didn't mock God, but he did mock certain beliefs, and he also mocked Jake for being over and under protective of Sophia. Canepa has him read from the proffer to refresh his memory about going to Kenneth's, and he said he only remembers pieces of the proffer. That's where that selective memory loss comes in. They once also stole a truck that Billy was convinced was full of gold, and it was full of crap, like junk trash. He said Chris Newcomb, George, and Angela were also there when they stole that. Canepa asked him if Angela had a favorite grandchild, and Jake said he did accuse her of favoring Vine. He describes his relationship with George as them being two peas in a pod. Kind of funny because pods are in prisons and they won't be two peas in a pod because they'll be in separate prisons. But Canepa asked about when Billy pulled off the road and asked if he wanted to back out. Jake said no because he had to protect Suds. She asks if he remembers saying in his proffer if George would have shot little Chris if he came out of the room. There was an objection to that. I don't know if he was allowed to answer. It wasn't clarified. He said he originally came forward out of curiosity, confession-wise, to see what the state would offer him. Angela asks him what Bible verses are important to him, and I pulled what I could. So there's one passage in Jonah. Is that a book in the Bible? Jonah, it says, they that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. He has a favorite in 2 Chronicles, something about two kings battling. And then Matthew 5:25, agree with your adversary quickly while you are on the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you to the judge hand you to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Assuredly, I say to you, you will by no means get out of there till you have paid the last penny. So Parker, I don't know that this came at the very end, but he says, you, sir, are a cold-blooded killer, and Jake kind of smiles and says, I am. Parker says, you're a liar, and Jake said, I was. Jake was asked if he's become more religious since jail, and Jake said he's known in jail, get this, as Pastor Jake or Pastor Wagner. He's read the Bible 23 times. He said at the time of the murders, he thought he was a good Christian, and he went to church once a year. He used to tell George that he was going to hell a lot for his lifestyle. When Parker asked if he was finished questioning, Parker said he was finished, and he threw up his hand and he said, take him away, and kind of shooed. Parker said, you're a stone cold killer, and we're lying all the time and sold your testimony to save your life. So actually, this is when Parker says, take him away, judge, no further questions, and kind of does that with his hand. So I could give Parker a big fat high five right now. I think it seems like Parker did a good job on cross. I think he got some things out of Jake that we haven't heard. There were some big revelations yesterday for sure. But anyway, so that is what happened today. And I think it, okay. So, oh, by the way, at the very end, after the jury's gone and everybody, it was still filming, the defense asked if they can go ahead and take death off the table for George. And the prosecution says that they're finished with Jake. He can be released as a witness. The judge asked Canepa if they would like to discuss if death is still on the table anymore. And Canepa said they would like to discuss that, but not publicly. So very interesting. Because like I said, there were some discrepancies and, I wonder if seeing George in person for the first time in nearly 4 years I don't know that Jake has emotion, but clearly there's something there between the four of them. So who knows? I guess we'll find out. So next week we'll get Angela's side of it, and I'm interested to see what she's going to be asked. And I don't know that it will be as explosive as having Jake on the stand, just because Jake was there the night of the murders and we had some answers that we didn't have before. But then again, she may have other insight that Jake wasn't able to give because he's not Angela. So that's kind of it for this week. And I just want to give a big thank you to everybody who's been sharing the channel. The growth has been, this week, I think, is the biggest growth I've ever seen. And you guys really just don't know how much I appreciate it. I love what I do. I love being able to bring it all together and do this every day. And if it weren't for you guys, I'd be talking to myself. So big thank you to old and new listeners alike. Just a big family. And we all can just agree that we want to see justice for the Rodens, Hannah Gilley, her family, and the Roden family. And maybe, hopefully, with a guilty verdict sooner than later, they can breathe a little deeper than they have in many years since this has happened. All right, guys, y'all have a good weekend. Unless something crazy happens, I will see you Monday. I'm going to take some time for me and mine this weekend. We'll see you soon.